Facing a midlife crisis? Find courage in everyday women's stories. Subscribe to Resilient Women Rising.
The Fabric of Reinvention: How a 50-year-old divorced woman reclaimed her life and launched a fashion empire. Grace Min stood in the dim hallway clutching an eviction notice that trembled in her hand. At 50, newly divorced after 25 years, she never imagined her husband's betrayal would leave her not only heartbroken, but homeless. The delicate lace curtains they'd chosen together fluttered in the spring breeze through the open window, a silent reminder of the life she was about to lose. Just a month ago, Grace discovered his affair and that he'd quietly refinanced their mortgage to fund a lavish lifestyle for his new companion. As the dreadful realization sank in, bills piled up on the coffee table, the foreclosure letters loomed, and her savings dwindled to nothing. In that moment of utter despair, something fierce kindled within her. This would not be her undoing. The next morning, Grace found herself at the corner cafe where she'd been working part-time since the divorce, her trembling fingers wrapping around a hot latte. She opened her notebook and began sketching furiously tailored jackets with unexpected color pops, dresses that combined comfort with couture, and scarves that felt like wearable art. She remembered her mother's old sewing machine humming through childhood nights and the pride she once had in her own creativity. If her marriage had built her a cage, she would now design her own wings. That afternoon, she showed her friend and former design partner, Sarah Lynn, the rough napkin sketches. "These are incredible," Sarah said, eyes bright with possibility. "If we can translate these into patterns, we could have a capsule collection ready in weeks." Sarah's confidence washed over Grace like a balm. "I know a small showroom owner in Soho who might take a chance on a fresh voice," Sarah added, dialing her phone. Grace's heart pounded. Could she risk her remaining funds and fragile self-esteem on a leap into the unknown? As she watched a delivery truck trundle past, emptying another foreclosure sign onto her street, she pressed her palm to her chest and whispered, "I'm ready." That evening, her phone buzzed with a single line, "We would love to meet you. The Urban Threads Collective, Soho showroom." Grace Min's heart raced as she stepped into the lofty Soho showroom the next morning, sunlight dancing off exposed brick walls. Behind a sleek glass desk sat Lara Chen, owner of the Urban Threads Collective, flanked by two junior buyers scrolling on tablets. Grace felt the eviction notice in her pocket like a stone, but she squared her shoulders and carried her portfolio like armor. Lara studied the sketches Grace spread across the desk, cropped bomber jackets in jewel-toned silks, wrap dresses with asymmetrical hemlines, and scarves woven with hand-dyed gradients. "These concepts are fresh," Lara said, tapping a tablet. "But we need samples to feel the fabrics, see the drape." One junior buyer snapped photos and sent a group text, "Designer in the house." Grace swallowed. I can have a prototype collection ready in 2 weeks if I can access my old sewing studio and materials." She braced for rejection. Lara leaned back. "We work fast. 2 weeks is tight, but I believe in striking while the buzz is hot." She smiled. "Show us what you've got." Elation and panic tangled in Grace's chest as she left the showroom clutching a small shapewear swatch from Lara's desk, a gesture of trust. She raced back to her friend Sarah's tiny loft studio, where bolts of linen, silk, and wool piled floor high. "We have a window," Grace gasped, tossing sketches onto Sarah's cutting table. "But I have just 14 days to produce 6 runway-ready looks." They dove into work. Nights blurred into dawns as Grace draped muslin prototypes on mannequins, tested color fastness with urgent steams, and adjusted patterns until seams sang. Sarah handled technical grading. Grace managed final fittings on 2 local models, measuring every curve, every stretch, ensuring each garment felt both empowering and effortless. On day 12, their doorbell chimed, delivery of custom woven silk from Japan, overnighted at Lara's request. Grace unwrapped the fabric, feeling its liquid softness exactly what her wrap dress design demanded. Sarah high-fived her. "We're in business." But as they cut into the silk, disaster struck. The bolt's dye bled when washed colors ran and stained the muslin underlayers. Grace's hands shook. If she couldn't salvage the silk gowns, she'd have nothing to show at the showroom's urgent press preview. Sarah refused to panic. "Call Lara," she said, dialing the showroom number. Grace swallowed her fear and explained. Lara offered a lifeline. "We have a small roll of undyed silk charmeuse in our back stock. I'll overnight that. Use your original color palette. My team will handle dye." Grace exhaled relief so fierce it left her lightheaded. On day 14, Grace and Sarah presented the finished 6 looks under bright spotlights in the showroom's loft. Press and buyers circled hand-stitched lapels, concealed pockets for phones, and reversible skirts doubling as minimalist capes. A local fashion blogger filmed every scene, praising the collection's bold elegance and purposeful details for real women. Lara handed Grace a glass of champagne. "You did it," she said. "Orders are already coming in 300 units for our spring launch, plus a custom capsule for our flagship in Tokyo." Grace's world spun from eviction notice to international orders in 14 days. Yet, as the showroom's chatter swelled, Grace's phone buzzed with a text from her landlord. "We need final mortgage payment by Friday, or I list the property." The electricity in her triumph flickered. She turned to Lara. "I'm honored, but I still need funds to secure my studio lease and finalize my boutique purchase." Lara smiled with genuine warmth. "Consider your rent and mortgage part of our vendor support. We'll wire in advance against your first orders." Grace's breath caught relief flooding back stronger than fear. That evening, as Grace closed the showroom doors, she allowed herself a single, triumphant tear. From the brink of homelessness to launching a global collection in 2 weeks, her reinvention had only just begun. Back in her small Brooklyn apartment, her overnight headquarters, Grace Min stared at her buzzing phone. Production lines in New Jersey and Los Angeles were churning out pieces destined for Urban Threads Collective and its Tokyo flagship. Yet as wave after wave of order confirmations rolled in, her heart hammered with the realization she was no longer just a designer. She was the CEO of a nascent fashion brand. The next morning, she and Sarah met over takeout dumplings to tackle the avalanche of tasks inventory. Tracking, quality control, client communications, and social media content planning. "We need a brand story video," Sarah said between bites. "Something that shows why your designs matter." Grace nodded, jotting notes behind the scenes footage, client testimonials, and her own journey from eviction to empire. That afternoon, a luxury boutique buyer from Milan emailed, "We'd like to carry your collection this fall." Grace felt dizzy. "Europe?" She exchanged a look with Saratwa women whose shared faith in her vision was paying off. At the first trunk show in Urban Threads Soho showroom, Grace watched as buyers and influencers moved through her 6 signature looks and 15 additional ready-to-wear pieces. She caught sight of renowned stylist Victor Nguyen critiquing a double-breasted coat on a mannequin, then nodding in approval. He lifted a swatch. "Your use of contrast panels is masterful," he said. "We'll feature this in Vogue's upcoming New Voices editorial." Grace's chest tightened with excitement and gratitude. But success invited scrutiny. That evening, a well-known fashion blogger posted a damning accusation. Grace Min's collection bears uncanny resemblance to a 2018 European designer who's long overshadowed by big houses. "Is this plagiarism?" The post went live just as Grace was falling into bed, exhaustion pulling at her eyelids. She awoke at dawn to a flurry of crisis texts and tweets. Sarah came over immediately, consoling while dialing their lawyer. Grace spent the morning poring over her original sketches, dated, watermarked, and deposited with the local design council. She compiled a mountain of evidence proving her collection's authenticity, her notebook entries, fabric swatches, calendar timestamps, and Clara's pattern-making files. That afternoon, they released a calm, professionally shot video Grace walking through her Brooklyn studio, speaking to her personal archives. Every stitch, every color choice began here. The blog accusation unraveled as buyers and journalists alike hailed Grace's integrity and documented process. Major publications corrected the record, and within 48 hours, the plagiarism claims vanished. Emboldened, Grace prepared for the brand's first runway show at New York Fashion Week. With Sarah handling logistics, Grace focused on creative direction, selecting a live string quartet for the opening number, designing a minimalist stage backdrop of cascading fabric panels, and casting models in a celebration of all ages, shapes, and backgrounds. Opening night arrived in a cavernous warehouse, transformed by soft spotlights and an expectant hush. Grace took her place in the wings, heart hammering. The quartet's first chord rang out, and one by one her garments paraded past the audience, each design a testament to her journey, resilience restitched into silk and wool. As the final Luca dynamic trench coat with bold color-blocked lapels glided by, the applause thundered. Grace stepped onto the runway for her bow, tears gleaming under the bright lights. Years of loss, betrayal, and eviction condensed into this singular moment of vindication. After the show, buyers clamored for meetings. Influencers flooded Instagram with Gala Grace Mine FW, and Daniel's triumphant text arrived, "I watched the live streams, oh proud of you." That night, Grace returned to her apartment with its cardboard boxes, now replaced by fabric rolls and design portfolios, and fell into bed, content yet restless. Tomorrow, she would finalize the lease on her own studio, hire her first salaried staff, and begin mentoring women facing the very hardships she had overcome. Grace Min had transformed the fabric of her life, weaving pain into purpose and doubt into daring innovation. And now, as dawn crept through her window, she knew her story was not just about clothes, but about the limitless power of reinvention stitch by confident stitch. In the bright morning light of her new Brooklyn atelier, Grace Min surveyed racks lined with swatches and samples. Today, she'd officially onboard her first full-time team, a seamstress who fled an unstable gig economy, a recent fashion school graduate eager for mentorship, and her longtime friend Sarah Lynn, now director of brand development. Grace felt a surge of pride. These women weren't just employees, they were co-creators in a vision born from her own reinvention. As she welcomed her new hires with homemade matcha lattes, Daniel appeared on video call, his face framed by a wall of awards and photo shoots. "Your story's going global," he beamed. Major lifestyle outlet just greenlit an 8-episode docuseries on Grace Min's reinvention. Grace absorbed the news with a mixture of exhilaration and pressure. This next chapter would be broadcast to millions. The afternoon buzzed with activity fittings for upcoming lookbooks, negotiations with a Los Angeles factory to scale production, and a quick Instagram live Q&A with fans. As Grace seamed a sample pocket into a wool blend blazer, her phone pinged with an urgent alert. The factory reported a shipping delay. Critical zippers for the fall line were on back order, threatening to push deliveries beyond their launch window. Her heart sank. Autumn orders were already flowing in, and retail partners expected on-time fulfillment. Grace gathered her team. "We need a contingency," she said, voice steady. The seamstress suggested alternative hardware the graduate offered to source small batch suppliers. Within an hour, Grace had re-engineered designs to accommodate brass toggles readily available in New York's garment district, and Daniel's assistant liaised with the factory to expedite partial shipments. That evening, Grace and Sarah pored over revised line sheets by skylight, their laughter punctuating the hum of sewing machines downstairs. They solved each problem creatively, Grace's hallmark, and affirmed their capability to weather every storm. 2 days later, a glossy trade show hall in Manhattan overflowed with buyers and press. Grace debuted her fall collection on a custom display, each garment paired with a story card inspired by 4-year estrangement cashmere dyed under emergency conditions button closures sourced locally. Attendees lingered, enchanted by the blend of authenticity and craftsmanship. A buyer from a top-tier department store approached her. "Your story resonates with our clients," she said. "Can we feature an exclusive capsule for the holiday season?" Grace nodded, envisioning shelves lined with her signature designs as far as the eye could see. Riding this momentum, Grace hosted the first Grace Men Fellowship a weekend workshop in her atelier for mid-career women designers. Seated at communal tables, participants shared their struggles: burnout, ageism, lack of resources. Grace guided them through hands-on pattern draping, personal branding exercises led by Daniel, and mindfulness sessions emphasizing resilience. By Sunday's closing circle, tears and laughter mingled as women exchanged contacts and set collaborative goals. That night, as Grace locked up the studio and shut off the lights, she paused in the empty space and whispered to the walls, "Thank you for holding my dreams." Outside, the city that once threatened her with eviction now lay conquered beneath her determined stride. Yet on her pillow awaited a new message: flight delayed. We'll need to postpone showcase. The next adventure beckoned, reminding Grace that reinvention is an ever-evolving pattern, one she was ready to tailor into the unforeseen chapters ahead. Grace Men stared at her phone as the notification lit up her darkened bedroom. Showcase postponed logistics issue. She exhaled, recalling the months of planning venue scouting, VIP invitations, press passes all lined up for next week. Yet, instead of sinking, she imagined a new path. The next morning, over steaming green tea in her atelier's sunlit loft, Grace gathered her core team: Sarah Lynn, the seamstress Lily Chen, and Daniel joining via video. "They can't delay us," Grace declared. "Our momentum's too strong. We'll pivot to a global live-streamed launch coast to coast with Grace Men." Faces lit with excitement as Daniel sketched the virtual event flow behind the scenes. Studio tours, live model fittings, Q&A with international press, and real-time ordering links. By evening, Grace stood under ring lights in her atelier, scrolling through final graphics for the live stream. Social media teasers teased an exclusive first look at her winter capsule. Fans from New York to Tokyo buzzed with anticipation. When she finally hit go live, her heart hummed with possibility. The broadcast began with Grace welcoming viewers in fluent English and Korean, her signature silk scarf draped like a banner of triumph. She introduced each look: plush velvet coats, cashmere blend turtlenecks, and leather-trimmed wool trousers, while Lily and Sarah modeled alongside. Real-time orders poured in, and behind them, production teams in Los Angeles and Seoul confirmed inventory. Comments scrolled: "Grace, you're unstoppable. Ordering now, my first self-gift in years." Midstream, a guest appearance by a top Hollywood stylist who praised Grace's fusion of timeless tailoring and modern adjacent orders skyrocketing. Even without the runway, Grace's designs reached buyers across 6 continents that night. 48 hours later, as shipping confirmations pinged across her inbox, Grace received a message from Vogue's editor-in-chief: next season's cover story, Grace Men Reinvention Tailored. She sank into her vintage armchair, tears of joy flooding her cheeks. The world had not only embraced her designs, but her story proof that resilience could be worn like armor and styled for every woman. That weekend, Grace hosted a surprise pop-up in her atelier for the women of her fellowship program. Over champagne and churro bites, she announced a new initiative: the Grace Men Accelerator, a 6-month mentorship and micro-grant program for women over 40 launching creative businesses. The atelier erupted in cheers. Lily wiped her eyes, Sarah clasped Grace's hands, and Daniel watched in proud silence. Closing her eyes that night, Grace reflected on the eviction notice that had thrust her into reinvention. From coffee shop sketches to global live stream triumph, she'd woven adversity into couture, heartbreak into hope. And as she drifted to sleep, she dreamed of the next pattern awaiting her. Touch knowing that, with every stitch, the fabric of her life would continue to expand in strength and style. Winter's first snowfall dusted the city in silk white as Grace Min prepared for her biggest feat yet. Debuting her Grace Min Accelerator cohort's first capsule collection on a pop-up runway in Tokyo. Despite global success, nothing tested her resolve like melding 16 women's visions into a cohesive showcase on foreign soil. In the weeks before departure, the atelier hummed with activity. Lily hand-stitched custom linings for each designer's garments. Sarah organized lookbooks with QR-coded bios, and Daniel coordinated virtual press passes across time zones. Grace led daily confidence incubators, guiding participants through breathing exercises and impromptu styling. Drillshire owned Journey's hard-won lessons shaping every session. At dawn on departure day, Grace hugged her team goodbye at JFK. Her accelerator designers boarded the charter flight, each clutching a curated clutch bag embossed with the program's Phoenix logo symbol of rebirth. Grace settled into her seat, heart fluttering with excitement and nerves. Arriving in Tokyo beneath a sky of lantern-like clouds, Grace and her cohort were swept into La Forêt Harajuku, a historic art space reborn as a fashion venue. Backstage, the designers, some rookies, some veterans returning from midlife hiatus checked seams, adjusted draping, and practiced their runway walk. Grace moved among them like a proud matriarch, offering last-minute encouragement. Own the stage. You belong here. As evening fell, the grand hall filled with a sea of international buyers, bloggers, and fashion editors. The lights dimmed and a hush settled. Grace took the mic, voice warm in both Korean and English tonight. We celebrate reinvention of fabric, of lives, of dreams. These women remind us that creativity doesn't retire at 40. The runway came alive, structured peplum jackets over flowing skirts, asymmetrical knits in jewel tones, and sculptural overcoats in tactile leathers. Each step echoed stories of divorce, career upheaval, and ultimate emancipation. Cameras flashed, cheers rose, even stoic Japanese buyers nodded in admiration. Mid-show, Grace spotted a familiar face in the front row, Lara Chen, whose franchise offer she'd reimagined, now beaming with pride. Their eyes met in silent congratulations, an alliance born of shared vision. At curtain call, all 17 women lined the runway hand in hand. The applause thundered. Grace bowed deeply, the weight of her journey resonant in every heartbeat. Backstage, envelopes arrived, orders and partnership offers from Paris boutiques, a feature request from Elle, and inquiries for future accelerator cohorts in London and Sydney. Grace's breath caught. Her dream was no longer confined to her own. Branded had blossomed into a global platform for women's reinvention. That night, under Tokyo's neon glow, Grace raised a toast with her accelerator designers. To every woman who refused to fade, she said, "May we continue to craft our destinies one stitch at a time." And as snowflakes danced outside, Grace Min knew her greatest creation wasn't a garment, but a community of fearless women rewriting fashion and their lives together. Spring melted Tokyo's snow into cherry blossom showers as Grace Min returned to Brooklyn, her luggage heavier with samples and her heart fuller with purpose. Back at the atelier, she found messages piling up, invitations to speak at women's leadership conferences, requests to judge design competitions, and a proposal from a lifestyle network to produce a documentary series on her accelerator's global impact. Before diving in, Grace carved out a weekend retreat on Long Island for her first accelerator alumni reunion. 16 women gathered in a restored farmhouse by the sea each, arriving by car with pieces they'd created after the Tokyo showcase. Over a long table set with fresh spring greens and jasmine tea, They shared triumphs and challenges, a bridal collection that sold out in London, a sustainable swimwear label finding its footprint in Los Angeles, a milliner crafting hats for a high-profile artists tour. As petals drifted outside the open windows, Grace led a ceremony passing her grandmother's vintage thimble around the circle each woman, pressing it to her palm and whispering one word that defined her journey: hope, resilience, belief. When the thimble returned to Grace, its metal worn smooth by hope-filled hands, she realized the symbol had transcended her own story. It now belonged to every life she'd touched. That evening, as lanterns glowed in the orchard, Grace slipped aside with Daniel, who'd flown in to surprise her. He slipped an envelope into her hand. Inside was a plane ticket to Milan Fashion Week and a note: because Italy deserves the world's boldest reinventions. Love, D. Grace's eyes shone. Together, they toasted under the blossoms, mother and son, partners in both life and legacy, knowing that their next adventure awaited across the globe, ready to be stitched into the ever-expanding tapestry of reinvention they'd begun weaving years ago. Milan's spring air carried the promise of Renaissance sparkle when Grace, Min, and Daniel stepped off the train at Porta Garibaldi station, their suitcases rolling over cobblestones that had once borne the dazzle of Versace and Armani. They checked into a sunlit flat overlooking the Duomo, its cathedral spires reaching toward possibility as high as Grace's rising ambitions. The next morning, they arrived at the Palazzo della Moda, a restored palazzo turned fashion week venue where a hush of expectation settled over the courtyard. Backstage, Grace surveyed 16 gleaming racks of her latest capsulia fusion of Brooklyn grit and Italian grace-structured silk blouses with hand-embroidered motifs, linen trousers tailored with architectural pleats, and vibrant puffer jackets in unexpected jewel tones. As models rehearsed their walk, Grace felt the familiar buzz of both excitement and nerves. Daniel stood beside her, tablet in hand, streaming behind-the-scenes snippets to thousands of followers. Among the onlookers, she spotted buyers from Tokyo and New York, influencers from London, and even a guest appearance by a celebrated Italian couturier who nodded in approval when Grace passed her. The show opened with a flourish, a slow string quartet weaving into electronic pulses as each look emerged under soft spotlights. Applause rippled through the grand hall when the Finalia floor-sweeping coat in brocade, its lining printed with Grace's own sketches, glided past. Cameras flashed, the audience rose in a standing ovation that echoed beneath frescoed ceilings. Grace and her team took their bows, every heartbeat magnified by triumph. Yet triumph gave way to a sudden challenge. As the crowd dispersed, Grace's PR manager approached with urgent news. A major investor in Milan had unexpectedly pulled out of a joint venture to open a flagship boutique. The reason: unforeseen tax disputes with local authorities that threatened the palazzo itself. Without that partnership, Grace's plan for a permanent European presence hung in the balance. That evening, Grace and Daniel sat under the Duomo's glowing facade, digesting the setback over espresso. "We can't let this derail us," Grace said, voice steady despite the disappointment. "We'll find another partner, smaller but reliable. And we'll adapt our concept, perhaps a pop-up every season instead of a fixed shop." Daniel nodded, scrolling through his notes. "I know a logistics startup in Milan that wants a cultural collaboration. We can pitch to them tomorrow." Fueled by espresso and resolve, Grace met the prospective collaborators the next morning at a cafe in Brera. She laid out a vision: a rotating gallery shop where local artisans and her collections coexisted, each season curated by an accelerator alumna. The startup CEO, impressed by Grace's flexibility and community ethos, agreed to pilot the concept, providing space, marketing, and operational support in exchange for shared revenue. Within days, pop-up permits were granted. Installation crews transformed a historic courtyard kiosk into a chic mini salon, boutique, and Grace's European clientele buzzed with excitement. On opening night, under twinkling fairy lights and the scent of jasmine, Grace watched Milanese fashionistas try on her designs, alongside handcrafted leather goods from her accelerator members. The collaboration embodied her journey bridging continents, cultures, and generations through the art of reinvention. As the pop-up's doors closed behind the final guest, Grace and Daniel shared a quiet moment beneath the kiosk's awning. "We turned an obstacle into an opportunity," Daniel said, pride shining in his eyes. Grace rested her hand on his shoulder. "Adaptation is the true fabric of success," she replied. On their last morning in Milan, Grace penned a personal note to her accelerator cohort, inviting them to join the European pop-up next season. She folded the letter into an envelope stamped with the Phoenix Cresta symbol that had guided her from eviction to empire, from doubt to daring. Stepping onto the train platform, Grace inhaled the spring air once more, heart open to the next chapter, a season of pop-ups across Paris, London, and beyond, each destination a testament to the enduring power of resilience stitched into every scene. As summer unfurled across Europe, Grace Min and Daniel embarked on a whirlwind tour of pop-ups from Milan's cobblestone courtyards to Paris's Jardin du Palais Royal. Each new venue brought fresh faces eager for Grace's signature blend of effortless tailoring and bold color. Yet between fittings and press interviews, Grace felt the tug of home her Brooklyn atelier and the women she'd mentored waiting to see the world she helped open. Midway through their Paris stint, Daniel received a worried text from Sarah Lilly. Their lead seamstress had fallen ill, and the Brooklyn team was struggling to meet a sudden bulk order for the department store capsule. Without missing a beat, Grace rearranged her schedule, postponing a London brunch with buyers, and booked the next flight back to New York. Landing at JFK in the gray dawn, Grace rushed to the atelier. Pulling on an apron and stepping behind the sewing machine alongside Sarah, Daniel via video on her phone, and 3 members of the accelerator lending extra hands. They worked through bolts of fabric until sunlight streamed through the windows, and by noon, every detail was perfected. That evening, a live stream from Paris showed Grace closing the pop-up with her infectious laugh as locals cheered. When she toggled back to her Brooklyn screen, she saw Daniel's proud smile and heard Sarah's hoarse cheer echo in her ear. Across 14 time zones, Grace realized her true empire wasn't built on one city or collection. It was the network of hearts and hands she'd woven together. Back in Paris the following morning, Grace stepped onto the Avenue Montaigne for a scheduled meeting with an eco-fashion consortium. As she admired her reflection in a gilded storefront window, her phone buzzed with breaking news. Silver Strand Salon, the unexpected beauty comeback of the year her mother's story trending anew, this time as a testament to cross-industry reinvention. A thrill shot through Grace. Her life's tapestry had grown richer, every thread connected. Yet, as the eco-fashion director appeared to greet her, Grace felt a new pulse of possibility and a question shimmering in her mind. How many more lives could she touch by blending beauty, fashion, and resilience? And with that thought spinning like a fresh bolt of fabric in the Paris breeze, Grace Min knew her journey would continue in ways she had yet to imagine. Divorced woman reclaimed her life and launched a fashion empire.